Hey, so today I want to talk to you about quite a serious topic, but in a light-hearted fashion, because I think it's the best way to discuss this. So I've got my props here and I hope to keep you entertained, but there's a reason for these props. Anyway, back in 2021, after attending a conference, a two-day conference at the Royal Aeronautical Society in London, which I'm a member, I was asked by publishers, would I be willing to write an article about the relationship between science fiction and defense and security, you know, how science fiction writing can affect defense and security. So at the time I agreed, I had time on my hands. You can actually find that article if you Google Sci-Fi in defense and security. It should come up usually in the first page, Delphine Ryan, Sci-Fi connection to defense and security. It's quite a jolly article. So to do that article, I had to do a little bit more research, and I came across this paper, which was written in 2015. And interestingly enough, one of the authors was actually employed at the time, I don't know if it's still employed, but at the time employed by Icon PLC, which is a healthcare and intelligence company supporting pharmaceutical, biotechnology and medical device companies, as well as offering full clinical trial execution. So the title of this article is Psychological Exploration of Engagement in Geek Culture. And in a nutshell, this 38-page paper, which I've only printed 8 pages because I don't want to waste my ink, concludes that there is something mentally wrong with people who love science fiction or fantasy and all those wonderful activities, tabletop gaming, computer gaming, going to Comic-Con, reading comics, all these sort of things. And in a nutshell, this is what they say. These studies present evidence that individuals may engage in geek culture in order to maintain narcissistic self-views, the great fantasy migration hypothesis is what they called it, to fulfill belongingness needs, the belongingness hypothesis, and to satisfy needs for creative expression, the need for engagement hypothesis. Because they're basically saying there that geek culture is a subculture of enthusiasts that is traditionally associated with obscure media. And in brackets, obscure media, they're saying Japanese animation, science fiction, video games, etc. So the first line of the abstract tells you how wrong the authors are. Because if science fiction, video games, and Japanese animation are obscure media, then I don't know where they've been for the past 30 or 40 years. Because Star Trek, Star Wars, I mean, science fiction, the pulp fiction from the 40s, 1930s, I mean, this has been existing for decades. Lord of the Rings was in 1950s. So there is nothing obscure about fantasy and science fiction. But the entire paper pushes the idea that all these things are obscure. And the authors created in order to do the study, they created a geek culture engagement scale. The entire study is done on this scale. It is a survey, and it is all couched in pseudo-scientific language. And on this scale, you have tabletop, computer gaming, internet, cosplay, puppetry, robots, fantasy, sci-fi, anime, quite a lot, you know, puppetry, robotics, hobbies, role-playing, all sorts of topics which many people are engaged in. And interestingly enough, right at the bottom, they've added BDSM and polyamour. And you're like, hang on a second, why are you adding sexual stuff to something that has to do with science fiction? So the whole paper goes on about suggesting the mental disorder in people who love science fiction, fantasy, attend Comic-Cons and that sort of thing. So I'm going to read you some little excerpts there. It says here, in the abstract, it says, geek engagement is found to be associated with elevated grandiose narcissism, extroversion, openness to experience depression and subjective well-being across multiple samples. And then it goes on here, the word geek is used to describe not only enthusiasts in science, technology and engineering, but also especially devoted fans of media, which are called fandom geeks. Well, that's what they're calling them in here. Here we refer to geek culture as a subculture of enthusiasts that is traditionally associated with obscure media, and again in brackets, Japanese animation, etc., which is not obscure media. I mean, look at Studio Ghibli, you know, My Neighbor Totoro, look. Loads of people love this. Studio Ghibli are just fantastic and beautiful animation, but there's nothing obscure about that. Or Star Wars, or countless topics which are known around the world for decades. And here we go, it continues here. Despite the popularity of geek culture, it has received little attention from the social sciences. Thank God for that. And you see here, what's very interesting is the social sciences, and none of this is based on anything scientific. This is wholly done by surveys, trying to classify human creativity into something wrong. You know, why would people want to go to a Comic-Con, or why do people like science fiction? And then trying to put some labels to it. And they actually go ahead and put labels to it. And here it goes on. So it goes on about the hypothesis. And then here, our aim is simply to describe and understand individual motivations for participating in geek culture. If I could have the three authors in front of me, I would say, you know, have you ever considered that people consider things fun to do? Like, life doesn't have to be serious. You can just enjoy things for the sake of enjoying things. And that's what artists bring out, isn't it? I mean, look at the number of people who can paint and who can sing and who can play an instrument and who create this, that, and the other. I mean, it's just fantastic. That's what makes us human, is we can create. If you look at a table, if you look at a rock, if you look at a car, what's the difference between those things and a human? A human creates ideas. A human has idea. An object doesn't have ideas. And yet there is this continuous, relentless assault by psychology, modern psychology and psychiatry, to continuously attempt to label human creativity or human emotions or human conditions with a label, with a mental disorder. And in here, they actually really go on with this great fantasy migration hypothesis. And it goes on about the US society. Sorry about that, Americans, if you're watching this. But it says, in US society, inflated self-esteem and narcissism, which have increased steadily over the past few generations, are being met with a harsh reality of low youth employment and high debt loads. And I mean, they're including that in this research of people who like science fiction and fantasy. And anyway, it goes on, and they conclude at the end here, thus, narcissistic individuals who are unable to receive the admiration and praise to which they feel entitled may turn to a fantasy world where such praise is more easily obtained. And then it goes on, like the whole thing goes on, and it's loads of, as I said, pseudo-scientific language. Like I'm looking at that going, what word is that? I mean, I know what the word is, but, you know, there's no need for it. And it's all about people who enjoy science fiction, you know, geeks. And there is an attempt there to classify it as something abnormal. And this is really the problem. And I was thinking about, God, it's only a matter of time before the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders, the DSM, see my pinned video on this, that some new mental disorders is added because a person loves a particular topic. So it is worth reading. It is worth, you don't have to read the 38 pages, but go and look at it, find it, and, you know, recognize the real attack and assault on human creativity. And I think that is really what drives me to research the, you know, the rise of psychiatry and modern psychology, because all we see with those industries is the destruction of human creativity and ability. Everything is geared toward disability, something wrong with people, something wrong with being human. Being human is not a mental disorder.